what is correct and why. Ich Wasser trinke. Or ich trinke Wasser. Du bist müde. Or bist du müde? Let's learn how to get it right every time. Welcome to our third lesson of the complete A1 German course. Today, we're learning about basic sentence structure in German, how to form simple statements, and how to ask yes-no questions correctly. This lesson is essential because mastering word order is key to forming clear and correct sentences in German. And don't forget to stay until the end for a practice session to test what you've learned. Viel Spaß beim Lernen! And to start, let's dive into the basic structure of German sentences. In German, the most common sentence structure is Subject-Verb-Object, or SVO, which is very similar to English. This means that in a simple sentence, the subject comes first, followed by the verb, and then the object. Let's look at some examples. In the sentence, Ich trinke Wasser, the subject is ich, the verb is trinke, and the object is Wasser. So, it follows the pattern: subject, verb, object. Similarly, in Du liest ein Buch, you have du as the subject, liest as the verb, and ein Buch as the object. In simple statements, the verb always comes second in German sentences, and the subject is usually first. The object comes after the verb. This is the basic structure you'll use in most simple sentences. Now, let's briefly mention adverbs. Sometimes, adverbs of time or place can be added to a sentence. For now, just remember that these adverbs often come after the verb or object. We'll go into more detail about this later in the course, near the end of A1, when we focus on more complex sentences in German. As you can see in this sentence, Ich gehe morgen mit meinen Freunden ins Kino. We've added both an adverb of time, morgen, and an adverbial phrase of place, ins Kino. We'll learn how to form sentences like this later on in the course. Now, let's talk about how to form yes-no questions in German. Unlike in statements where the subject comes first, in yes-no questions, the verb comes first, followed by the subject. This is known as inverted word order and follows the verb, subject, object, or VSO structure. Let's look at some examples. In the question, Trinkst du Wasser? The verb trinkst comes first, followed by the subject, du, and then the object, Wasser. Similarly, in Liest du ein Buch? The verb liest comes first, followed by the subject, du, and then the object, ein Buch. To form yes-no questions in German, simply switch the position of the verb and the subject. It's that simple. The verb always comes first, followed by the subject, and then the rest of the sentence. Let's practice now this structure. I'll give you a few statements, and your job is to turn them into yes-no questions by switching the subject and the verb. Ich trinke Wasser. Trinke ich Wasser? Du liest ein Buch. Liest du ein Buch? Wir gehen ins Kino. Gehen wir ins Kino? After learning the basic sentence structure in German and how to form yes-no questions, let's look at some common mistakes when forming basic sentences in German. These are easy to make, but important to avoid as you practice building correct sentences. One of the most frequent mistakes is putting the verb in the wrong position in a simple sentence. For example, instead of ich Wasser trinke, the correct form is ich trinke Wasser, I drink water. Always remember that the verb must be in the second position in German statements. Another common mistake is mixing up word order when forming yes-no questions. Don't forget to switch the subject and the verb. Instead of saying ich bin Lehrer, the correct form is bin ich Lehrer? Am I a teacher? By being mindful of these common mistakes, you'll improve your ability to form correct German sentences and questions. Keep practicing, and you'll get it right. Now it's time to put what you've learned into practice. I'll give you a few sentences with the words in the wrong order, and your job is to rearrange them into the correct German sentence. I'll give you a moment to think before we go over the answers together. Let's get started. Great. Let's check the answers. Ich frühstücke morgens. Wir spielen Fußball im Park. Der Hund schläft hier. Well done. Now, let's try a few yes-no questions. Rearrange the words to form correct yes-no questions. Here are the correct yes-no questions. Spielt Fußball im Park? Schläfst du hier? Essen wir jetzt? Excellent work. You've successfully practiced both statements and yes-no questions. Keep practicing, and you'll be forming German sentences in no time. Let's quickly review everything we've learned in today's lesson about basic German sentence structure. First, we learned that the most common sentence structure in German is subject-verb-object. In these examples, the subject comes first, followed by the verb, and then the object. However, the subject and object can switch places depending on emphasis or word order, but the verb must always remain in the second position. Next, we learned how to form yes-no questions by switching the order of the subject and the verb. In the examples on the screen, the verb comes first, followed by the subject. This is the typical word order for yes-no questions in German. By understanding the basic sentence structure and knowing how to invert it for questions, you're well on your way to forming simple sentences in German. Keep practicing, and these patterns will start to feel natural. Great job today! You've learned the basics of German sentence structure and how to form yes-no questions. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more lessons. Feel free to leave a comment below. Practice forming your own sentences. In our next video, we'll begin our first vocabulary lesson, and the topic will be family. Stay tuned for that. And if you want to reinforce and confirm your knowledge of the words required for the A1 level, click the playlist above. It's a great way to test yourself and solidify what you've learned. Macht's gut und bis bald.